Thanks for coming in to talk today. Going to try to have a little fun with this topic in terms of the future of user interface and what that means. I'll say thanks for coming all, because we're based in Austin, Texas. We're a software technology company, and we're going to talk about the future of the user interface. So I start just quickly with this Escher drawing, because what I love about Escher is, even a long time ago, before anything was talked about virtual worlds, he was creating those in his wood cuttings and his graphics and his drawings, and through that really combined, in my view, the first time of really looking at the real world and what could be possible in a virtual world. And what we're talking about in terms of this new dimension of user interface is changing how you interact with the world, both in terms of content and technology. And when you think about it, anything we do in terms of interacting with the world is through a user interface. So Intel was just talking about some great things about natural interaction. To set the foundation, I'm going to outline what we see as the three main components of any user interface today. First is touch. And if you notice that little square wave on the side, touch is a binary event. It's a button. You turn something on, you turn something off. Now, we've been very accustomed to that since the invention of the mouse over 50 years ago. But what I'm going to talk to you about today is in AR, VR, MR, XR, whatever you want to call it, there should be something better than going somewhere and hitting a button. The other thing about a button is it only does one thing at a time. That's it. So one of the things that we envision in the world of VR and AR is I'd love to eliminate the colloquialism of you have to drill through the data, because you got to go button, 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 button. So we'll talk about how that reality can happen today. Next is gesture. And love the slide again from Intel. I think gestures were kind of all the rage the last couple of years, but it really broke down in many respects for the same reason that the prior speaker already talked about. They're cumbersome, you got to memorize them, and as great as the HoloLens is in other devices, that camera may not always get that exact position. So it's not something that necessarily is going to work all the time. And related to what we're going to announce today at AWE, gestures are certainly not a hands-free capability for the enterprise. So if I'm working on something, I have to put it down and then do a gesture or whatever it might be. So again, from VR, spatial content and data, we think there could be a better way. Doesn't mean gestures should go away. Same thing with touch. And notice the square wave, it's a binary event. Something looks at the totality of the position, goes to a lookup table, comes back and says, what was that? And then do that one thing. So you have inherent latency. And NVIDIA and others have talked about when you really want to have an immersive experience, it should be fast, it should be fluid, it should flow like water. You shouldn't have latency. So when you have a button or you have a gesture, they all have latency inherently built into the solution. So the other one is voice. This is not picking on Amazon. It's just using an iconic reference to it. Voice is awesome. It's also, though, a verbal button. You can talk for 10 minutes to Alexa or anything else. It'll go do one thing. Now, speech to text translation is awesome. Plenty of places where voice is great. Essentially, though, from a control standpoint, it's the same as a button. You're just doing it verbally. Does one thing at a time, hence the square wave again. The reason why I keep mentioning that is to now tell you what we view as the fourth component of any UI, which is the use of motion. And given that it's superpowers to the people and we're talking about Hollywood, we can take what's in Hollywood, whether it's in Star Wars, Iron Man, Minority Report, where you may have seen interaction with objects through the motion of the parts of the body. We make that happen in reality. We also do it faster, and we make it more intuitive. So I'll explain how we do that. So the reason why I mentioned motion, the force, notice the wave on the left changed. That's no longer a square wave. That's an analog UI. So motion is the first time we can make true natural interaction in VR or AR, because as human beings, we're not stepper motors. You know, as I relate to any of you in the room, it's based on where I am and where you are. We work in fields, we're fluid. We're not these stepper motor, button, voice, gesture. It should be motion. The other benefit you get out of motion versus the other binary methods is you no longer just do one thing at a time. Through motion, we can now scroll, select, activate, and control, all with natural human motion. Multiple functions at the same time. It's hard to describe this verbally. I would say come see us in booth 654. It's a pretty amazing experience when you start flowing through content and data. You're no longer click, 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 click. So let me dig into that a little bit further as to how does that actually happen. So one of the things we talk about at Quantum Interface quite a bit is the use of the path. If you have a button-based mentality, you don't care about the path. You just care about getting to some XY or XYZ coordinate, hitting the button, and go do your next thing. Well, guess what? The path a user takes, and this is the path of any part of the body, eye tracking, head tracking, controller in your hand, your finger on a capacitive touchscreen, the path has huge, rich data that you can mine on the behavioral and cognitive mindset of the user. So if you're at a coffee shop and you're not sure what you want, I'm wandering, even as I say it, I almost can't stop it doing it. I'm wandering, my eyes move, my hand, but when I know what I want, I go in a straight line. So therefore, we can predict, literally, human intent based on motion, which is very transformative, and we'll explain a little bit how we do that. So I won't belabor some of these points, but one of the things that we talk about as we've engaged partners is like, wow, we're killing the mouse. Wired magazine talked about one of the issues in VR is the lack of an adequate user interface. And they're waiting for somebody to invent the mouse of VR. Well, that guy's Jonathan Josephson over there, our founder. And it unlocks, as they said, when you unlock the UI for VR, you're going to unlock the greatest creative potential on the earth. And that was from Wired magazine when they talked about VR. And that's what we think bringing in this fourth component, and you can use it with the other modalities, can really unlock content creation and consumption. And one of our partners told us that we work with on an enterprise application for the HoloLens is like, wow, if you change the UI, you can actually change the workflow. You can actually do what you want to do better. So how do we do that? A couple of graphic icons on the left, whether it's mobile, whether it's AR, VR, how do we do what I'm talking about? And again, we're happy to spend some more time on this with anyone that's interested, but we have a motion physics engine. So as I stand here in the room, I'm related to all of you by a vector and a distance and a time. In Cartesian coordinates, I'd be related to you based on some origin in the corner of the room, not very natural. How I relate to all of you is based on where I am and where am I moving. So we take advantage of that, and that's really through a combination of kinematics and kinetics. It's really organic physics, math stuff. It's hard, but it's very doable, and we're doing it today. The other is, if you look at all these different types of devices, we can use all the existing sensors in any HMD today. Nothing new needs to be invented. We can use a touch screen. We can use all the existing hardware and get the benefit of motion. And the difference is the QI physics engine is a part of that solution. It's also great to be software only. So I tell our development team, hey, it's just software. Let's do the next thing. So we're currently building out our software platform. And very importantly, it's hardware agnostic. So as people look at the enterprise, we believe one of the big components gating adoption of AR or VR or MR is it's different for every device. You have to do it this way in the HoloLens. You have to do it this way in ODG. You have to do it this way on the Vive. You have to do it a different way on your mobile phone. Well, we literally virtualize the user experience above the hardware layer and can create a common user experience across any device, any hardware platform. And since we can predict user intent, we can do so with much less physical movement of your head, your eye, anything that you have that you're interacting with from a sensor standpoint. So what we're announcing today, and just a few more points and we'll wrap it up, is we're announcing the first true hands-free AR solution that's cross-platform. If you come to booth 654, we're working with Epson, we have Vuzix, we have HoloLens, we have Google Cardboard, and we can create this more natural, intuitive user experience based on motion, because guess what? That's how we interact as humans. Again, we're not digital, we're analog. And you get a much better workflow. And so this is an exponential. Rickard from HTC said, hey, we need to look at exponential technologies. How do you amplify what's being done? Using a motion physics engine amplifies the utility of any head-mounted device or mobile, tablet, what have you. So a couple other things about QI. One of the things that we discovered actually in preparing for SIGGRAPH last year is using our motion physics engine, we can now do infinite locomotion in VR without nausea. Sounds like a big statement. It is a big statement. People that have tried it and experienced it, we were a South by Southwest Innovation Awards finalist for Science Fiction No Longer, because we literally take it out of science fiction and make it real. So you can now move, because of motion, infinite space in VR, unlock that content barrier today where people are saying, well, we can't build this world that big because people are going to get sick traversing through it. Well, we fixed that problem. The other thing is, it was also mentioned by many of the presenters today in the conference, sometimes you want to have a controller, sometimes you want to have a button. Well, what if you don't want to have a button? Because when you're in VR, if I've got to go press a button, you're breaking the experience. You're no longer immersed in that virtual world. So in our view is, take that out. You don't have to have a button. Maybe you have it in one place, but in the majority of the experience, use the existing hardware sensors, harness motion. Same UX across all hardware devices, as I mentioned. This one's really cool, because you can't fake it. As you move, what you're thinking comes through in your motion. When you know what you want, as I mentioned earlier, you go in a straight line. When you're not sure, you wander and you waver. So when you analyze the path and harness that engine, you can literally have a cognitive UI that understands what the user is thinking. We don't do AI, as I like to say, we're AI without the A, in that how I came into this room historically has nothing to do with what I'm going to do now and how I move. So therefore, we are an intelligent user interface. Now, if you want to build AI on top of it, fantastic, because we'll give you all that data and you could build some pretty amazing AI solutions on top of this interface that you can't do with touch, gesture, or voice. It just doesn't happen. And talked a little bit about latency, and some of the processor folks have talked about, you got to crunch and compute and make it fast. Well, we can get orders of magnitude faster with existing processing, because when you kill the button and you kill the mouse and you take out the click and you just flow through the data and you stay in the experience, it is wicked fast. So, I'll wrap. It took me forever to find this. I'm probably violating some digital rights thing, but I've been waiting for a year since last AWE to say we're actually bringing superpowers to the people like Ori talked today. So you take Thor, who just moves his hand to the hammer, bang, comes into his hand. So that's what we can create in the virtual worlds based on the QI physics engine with any hardware, any piece of content. It's natural, it's intuitive. People that have tried it, I've been in tech a long time, when they try it, they giggle, they laugh, they like, wow, how did it know what I wanted? Well, you told it. Well, how did I tell it? Well, based on how I was moving. So we're pretty excited about bringing this into the world of AR, VR, and MR. So with that, thank you. We'll be around in the expo the next 2 days. Appreciate your time and attention. I don't know if we have time for questions or not.